What's up, guys? My name's Brandon and welcome back to Apple Weekly. This past week was very exciting because we saw Apple break a streak they've been following for years. And in this episode, we're going to discuss the latest iOS 16.4 Beta 1 and the surprising amount of new features included, along with an update on the latest public release, iOS 16.3.1. And then after discussing the software, we're going to talk about the leaked iPhone 15 design and my thoughts on it, why USB-C on the iPhone 15 will not be what we think, Apple's mixed reality headset getting delayed yet again, how the Worldwide Developers Conference is going to be different this year, why to never Uber Apple products, and much more. And as always, if you guys want to stay updated with all things Apple, make sure to click that subscribe button down below so you don't miss next week's episode. Alright, so as far as updates go this week, we got quite a few. So we got iOS 16.3.1 as a public release on Monday, and then we got 16.4 Beta 1 for beta testers on Thursday. Of course, along with updates to watchOS, tvOS, macOS, and HomePodOS as well. And even the MagSafe 3 cable got a firmware update this week. So it was a very busy week in terms of software releases, no matter if you're on the beta program or not. All right, so let's first talk about iOS 16.4 because this first beta really surprised me, but it also has me worried that it might be the end for a lot of users. So first off, let's talk about the Safari web notifications because I feel like I kind of glazed over this in my What's New video, and it's a much bigger deal than I think even I realized at first. So this update not only gives us web notifications for Safari for websites, but it also allows you to add sites to the home screen from third-party browsers. So if you're using Google Chrome or any other browser, you're able to add a website to the home screen, whereas you were not able to do that on any previous version of iOS. And also web applications on the home screen can be badged now. So, I think first off, the web notifications is a massive deal because before you had to have an application in the App Store to be able to push notifications onto a user's device. But now that you're able to do that for Safari, that's going to be a way for a lot of applications and a lot of businesses to basically not have or not rely on the application in the App Store to get information to its users. So I see this as being a massive deal for applications. And I'll talk a lot more extensively about this in future releases, but I just wanted to mention that one more time again because it is a big change. So let's go on to the music application because there are even more music changes that I didn't even see in the What's New video. Even though I mentioned a ton of music changes, there are even more. So the first thing I want to talk about is, of course, we do have the UI change when you add a song to play next, but also when you add a song to a playlist, it does the same thing. So we have that different little notification down there. So if I add this to a playlist, you will see down at the bottom, we now have that one song added. The animation is significantly smaller, doesn't take up the full screen, and it goes away quicker than it did previously. And also on the album page or a playlist page, you could see that the little waveform animation is slightly smaller and just kind of more refined now in 16.4. And also if you go into your library and go to artists and then go to an artist, if you tap on their name up top, it takes you to the artist page. Whereas before there was no picture of them, it just kind of showed the artist over here to the left, and then it said show more by that artist down here as a button. But now this whole section up top is new in this update. Okay, so now let's talk about the home application. And if I sound sad and upset, it's because I am, because the home application is still a complete nightmare, a complete mess here in 16.4 Beta 1. The home architecture upgrade was re-released in Beta 1, but for whatever reason, I did not even receive it, even though I have several HomePods and several different devices on here. But even when I hooked up my HomePods, it still showed configuring and didn't let me see any of the settings for those HomePods. So home application still a mess here, although there is a small change I wanted to mention. If you tap on the three dots up here and go to your home settings, you will see that speakers and TV is now included in this section, whereas before it was separated and it was down here in its own section. So that is a nice little change there. In the wallet application, if you have an Apple Card, you will see next to latest card transactions, we have a little filter button right there, and you can filter your transactions by payments, refunds, or purchases. So it's nice to be able to see that. So now you can see all of my refunds that I have here from some of the Apple products, and you can kind of break it down by, what you want to show there. And then also if you go to the home screen and add a widget, you will see right up top, we have the brand new widget included here in 16.4. I'm going to go down just to show you guys the other way. So if you go to wallet, you will see if you swipe over, we have order tracking. So now we have an order tracking widget, and you can see different sizes for that here that you could put on the home screen if you have any active orders. And speaking of the wallet application, there's also code that reveals that Apple is preparing to release that high yield savings account that we've heard about for a while. So apparently in the code of 16.4, it kind of lays the framework for this to be implemented. So I would expect to see that by the time 16.4 releases, most likely on the day that it releases. And if you have a T-Mobile device and you're on the 16.4 beta, you will see a new option under your cellular settings for 5G standalone. And this is going to be the really fast 3 GB speed that is only on T-Mobile at the moment. We also see the Face ID prompt getting bolder and more round compared to 16.3.1. So shout out to this Reddit user for showing this. And then also from a Reddit user, you can see that there is now a link to the Apple support site when you have a phone locked, when you put in the wrong passcode a few times. So you can see a nice little addition there on the lock screen. Now, also in the code of 16.4, we see that the always on display is going to show in the battery section. So I tried to do this here in beta 1. I really tried, kind of draining my battery with the always on display, but I was not able to. So that tells me that the code is there, but I don't think this is implemented in beta 1. So you can see here, all I have is home and lock screen as far as my battery breakdown. I don't have anything that says specifically always on display, and that's what apparently the code reveals will show here at some point in 16.4. There's also a new accessibility option. So if we go to our accessibility and then go to motion, you will see that we have a new toggle here for dim flashing lights. And it says video content that depicts repeated flashing or strobing lights will be automatically dimmed. The video timeline will display when flashing lights occur in the timeline for supported media. So that is an excellent accessibility option that's been added here for 16.4. Also in settings, there's a minor change to the glyph icon for AirPods. So when you hook up your AirPods, you will see in settings for the menu, we now have a little gray background behind the glyph icon. Before it showed the AirPods icon there, but there was not a gray background like that. And then before we move on, I do want to talk about that beta update change. If you go into settings, go to general software update and then beta updates. I described this in my what's new video, so go back and watch that if you didn't already. But essentially in future iOS updates, the developer profile is not going to necessarily grant you access to the developer beta. You will need to be signed in on your phone to an account that is also registered as a developer on Apple's website. And that's why I said that I think this is going to be the end for a lot of users who relied on those pirated developer accounts to get the betas just a day or a week earlier than the public betas, I should say, because the public betas will continue to be free. The developer betas, though, are going to require that $100 a year charge, as it should have been all along. And since I've had so many questions on this, I do want to reiterate that this is not taking effect right now. Apple says in a future iOS release is when this is going to take effect. So my assumption is that this is going to begin with iOS 17. I think the iOS 17 is going to be kind of the cutoff period where you need to actually have a developer account. And for those thinking that you can just install it via IPSW, like just download the software and put it on your phone by plugging it into a computer, I don't think so. I think Apple's going to restrict that as well, and it's going to check if you have that Apple ID, associated with that developer account. So yeah, iOS 16.4 beta 1 has a ton of new features and changes, and I'm sure I'll discover even more in the coming days and weeks. And as far as iOS 16.3.1 goes, again, that was released earlier this week for those that are running the public version, which most of you probably are. Now, this included some minor bug fixes, but the real reason to update was for the security patches, including that WebKit bug that was being actively exploited. So that, along with the bug fixes, and I really haven't heard too many people complaining about the battery life or the performance. And for me, I have been running this on my main device here, and everything has been running perfectly fine. I mean, it's pretty similar to 16.3. I have noticed an improvement in my battery life though, more specifically when I have my always on display turned on. So there does appear to be some type of fix for that. Nothing major, but I have noticed about maybe like a 6 to 7% increase in my daily battery life, but I will continue testing that. But so far, nothing really to complain about with 16.3.1. I do also want to mention that Google Photos did crash at first with 16.3.1, but it was fixed the following day with Google updating its application. That was not an issue with Apple's software. And one other thing I wanted to mention is that Geekbench 6 was released. So you can see right here, we do have Geekbench 6, a slightly different app icon right there, but this is going to be a little bit more realistic and accurate when it comes comes to CPU and GPU benchmark reading. So I will start testing with Geekbench 6 from here on out. Okay, so now let's talk about what to expect next. And let me start with 16.3.2 because a few of you guys have mentioned that we are expecting a 16.3.2 because there was a HomePodOS and tvOS 16.3.2. But let me tell you that just because we got those two updates does not mean it's coming for iOS and iPadOS. So I'm not expecting to see a 16.3.2 at all. However, if we were to get that, I don't see it coming until the final week of February, if not the first week of March, the first full week of March. But again, I don't think we're going to see a 16.3.2 unless Apple finds something, again, like another exploit that has been actively, used out in the wild. But if it's not for that, I don't think we're going to see that. I think we're going to go straight to 16.4 after 16.3.1. So as far as 16.4 goes, Beta 2, I would expect Apple to skip next week, the week of the 20th, and then release Beta 2 right there on the week of the 27th. If history is any indication, that's what they usually do. They usually release it just over a week after the first beta. And then as far as the final release for 16.4, I think this is going to kind of depend on if we have an Apple Spring event or not and when that is. So I can see 16.4 coming the last week of March right here, so the 27th, the week of the 27th, or we could see it within the first 2 weeks of April. Again, it's going to completely depend on what Apple releases, or what they announce at that spring event and when those products actually launch. Because usually Apple waits for those products to launch before releasing the software. It makes sense. Otherwise, all the products would be leaked in the code. So we'll have to wait and see, but I am expecting a few betas of 16.4 until that final, and that kind of lines up with late March, early April. All right, so now let's move on to the latest Apple news. And let's start with the second biggest news piece from this past week, which is that Apple has delayed the mixed reality headset yet again. So now, instead of being introduced at a spring Apple event, it's expected to be announced at the Worldwide Developers Conference later this year. According to Mark Gurman, Apple has postponed a planned introduction of its first mixed reality headset from around April to June. They made the decision to delay the launch due to product testing showing that both hardware and software issues still needed to be ironed out. He also mentioned something pretty interesting regarding battery life. So the report says Apple has been working to fix issues with sensors on the device to enable the hand and eye control mechanism. It's also trying to strike a balance between battery life and performance. During development, the company made the decision to offload the device's battery to an external pack that would sit in a user's pocket. So that is very interesting, and I can't wait for this headset. I mean, especially the cheaper model that's rumored to come in 2024, because I know it's going to be expensive. Not all of you guys can afford this $3,000 headset, so that's why I'm really most looking forward to like the headset SE that's coming the following year. But it's going to be a totally different product for Apple, and it's going to absolutely make or break Apple's future in the AR VR space, since Meta has such a big head start right now. And by the way, I wanted to mention that this headset coming at WWDC almost guarantees that iOS 17 will get significantly less stage time, or if it's a recorded event, significantly less runtime on that event, which that would align with rumors that it's going to be more of a minor stability focused update, and I'm not mad at that. I would like to see another update like iOS 12 was, where we don't get a ton of new features, but we get a ton of bug fixes and improvements as far as performance and battery life goes. Okay, so if there's not going to be a headset at the spring Apple event, what can we expect to come within the next 2 months? Well, more new Macs, of course, and one of these new Macs expected is a 15-inch MacBook Air, according to both Ross Young and a recent DigiTimes report. So Ross Young said that he expects the new MacBook Air to launch in early April, given that display production is now underway, but it's possible that an announcement and pre-orders could occur sooner, sometime in March. And the DigiTime report says that the second quarter will see a release of a new MacBook Air series. And the word series indicates that there might be two sizes here, so maybe a 13-inch and a 15-inch, which would would actually mark the biggest MacBook Air size yet, 15 inches. That would be, a huge selling point for a lot of people, I think. But there is also a possibility of a 12-inch MacBook Air, according to a Korean leaker, which also could be pretty interesting. Now, in addition to that new MacBook Air, we could also expect to see new iPhone 14 and 14 Pro colors, Apple's rumored hardware subscription service, and potentially the unveil of a new iMac. However, even if we did somehow see an iMac get unveiled, it's not expected to release until late 2023 at the earliest. So Mark Gurman said this about it: "I haven't seen anything to indicate there will be a new iMac until the M3 chip generation." So that kind of indicates that a launch is going to happen, again, at the end of 2023 or maybe even 2024. All right, so now let's move on to the number one news piece from this past week, and that is that the iPhone 15 design has finally leaked. And we're talking about the CAD file here, which every year has been almost spot on with the final design that Apple ships. So just like previous years, the CAD file, which is the design file that Apple gives to case manufacturers, was leaked and sent to 9to5Mac, and then they had Ian Zelbo mock up the contents of that CAD file, and here is what that looks like. This is the iPhone 15 Pro, and let's unpack this. So first off, USB-C. I mean, that's a huge change here for the iPhone. The iPhones had, their own proprietary mechanism for charging forever now, and the fact that we're getting USB-C is massive news. And speaking of massive, that camera bump on the back is absolutely massive. So according to this, it's going to be, a good bit bigger than the camera bump on the iPhone 14 Pro Max, which is already pretty large. But if that's what it takes to get really good photos, then I'm fine with that, honestly. We also have more curvature on the edges, both on the glass and on the metal frame. So it is going to be a little bit more curved, not as, sharp and not as flat as the previous design. We also have slimmer bezels. So the body of this device is a few millimeters smaller. So it's probably going to be the same 6.1-inch display, but with a slightly smaller body. And anytime we have slimmer bezels, I am here for that. And also the volume rockers appear to show those rumored capacitive buttons instead of physical buttons. So just like on the iPhone 8 where the home button was capacitive and not a real home button, that's what it's looking like we're going to see for the volume rockers as well. And again, this is just the CAD file. It doesn't show us anything related to the software like with the dynamic island. So I would expect more changes to come, but this is almost certainly going to be close to the final product that Apple ships later this year. All right, so USB-C sounds great. I'm sure everybody's cheering, yay, we can use the same cable for, all of our devices. Well, not so fast, because again, you got to remember, this is Apple. So a new rumor suggests that the iPhone 15's USB-C port and the accompanying charging cables will have a lightning-like authenticator chip, meaning that you might not be able to use just any USB-C cable with that iPhone. And this rumor comes via Weibo, and I honestly think this could happen. I mean, it's very Apple, and it really makes a lot of sense. Regardless of how many people are going to get really upset at this move, it's going to be a great way for Apple to continue selling a ton of cables that are specific for the iPhone. And my guess here is that Apple is going to allow you to use USB-C, like a regular USB-C cable, to charge the phone, but maybe it's not going to be as fast. Maybe it's going to say it's an unsupported, cable. There's going to be something where Apple is going to really push the sales of their own specific USB-C cable. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do that. And then let's talk about why you should never Uber your purchases from the Apple Store, or really any store where you're spending thousands of dollars. And that's because a customer from California ordered a brand new iPhone 14 Pro Max and an Apple Watch Ultra, exactly the duo I have right here. And they selected Apple's same-day delivery option. On their website, you can do that. I think it's like $9. And he had both of these products stolen by the Uber driver who falsely marked the package as delivered and was subsequently not even given a refund by Apple. So as anyone would do, he continued trying to get a hold of Apple support for reimbursement, but here's how that went. I was connected to a senior manager of the online store who informed me that the investigation into the matter has been closed and that Apple will not be pursuing any further investigations. According to Apple, a delivery was made and they will not be compensating me for my losses. I requested evidence that the delivery was made to me personally, but the representative stated that the information regarding the internal investigation could not be disclosed to me. So let this be a lesson, please. Even if you don't have time to go to the Apple Store to pick up your products, just make time or just wait a little bit longer until you have more free time available to make the drive up there and pick it up yourself. And then finally, your weekly pro crash detection story, since all of these headlines will make you think it's a gimmick and just gives you false triggers when you're skiing. And that's because an Apple Watch potentially saved 3 lives in Germany when it called emergency services automatically after detecting a car crash. And a car crash it was, because this car was thrown 60 feet below the road. And if there were no witnesses to see that, that 21-year-old driver and the 2 passengers, if they were injured or trapped, they could have easily died down there. But since they had the Apple Watch on, the emergency services were able to track them, their location, they were able to be saved. So even with all the news on false triggers, please keep this feature turned on if you have it. If you have a newer Apple Watch or if you have an iPhone 14, it could really save your life one day. You don't like to think about that, but it really could save your life one day. So please keep that enabled. So anyways, guys, there you have it. That is the latest batch of Apple news from this past week, along with some updates on the latest iOS 16.4 Beta 1 and 16.3.1. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, I would appreciate if you give it a thumbs up. Also, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future iOS 16.4 beta videos and future iOS release videos. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.